Hey, IDs, welcome to week 10 or module 10 for formative assessment. This is a really, really important one, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But one thing I do want to mention is that the multimedia presentations that came in, I had a look at those, and I can tell you that, it never ceases to amaze me how well these presentations, these projects, or whatever, these assignments can come out. It's a great thing. What better way to express or teach your classmates, these really important principles of Clark and Mayer in multimedia by doing it through a multimedia presentation. It just is really comes out very, very well. And two of the ways that are most effective in my view, and that is, showing good examples of what it looks like in doing good multimedia, showing examples that follow the principles. That's one thing. The other thing that's at times even more compelling is when you can show a poor example, because it really lays it out how things in multimedia can be ineffective if they're done improperly. So if we're seeing, lots of text, we have lots of rather specific images. If we have audio in the background, we know that we're trying to, ask two channels of short-term memory to be working at the same time, and it's anything but that. It allows those two channels to compete against each other, and it's very, very difficult to follow. And I saw one or two examples of that, showing how it is so difficult to follow if you're trying to get both channels in operation at the same time. So that's a really, really important thing, and it really comes out in an example that doesn't work. So I always love that. So great job on those assignments. It's really, really wonderful. Now, formative assessment this week is really, really important. In fact, it's dear to me because it's the one that I've done most of my research work on. Is formative assessment, and that is, what we're doing here is we're trying to assess our students continuously within the context of a learning module or a learning lesson, even more specifically. And what we want to do is we want to make sure that the student is following along, they keep in pace with the instructor or whatever instructor's instruction that's going on. We want to check in with them. A lot of times they use the analogy of taking the pulse. It's kind of like, a nurse or a doctor wants to do something of a check on a patient. They're gonna take the pulse. They're gonna take the blood pressure. These are all like little checks to see how we're doing. And that's what we want to do with formative assessment. That's why you see those concept checks within the lessons within our course here, is that it's meant to check in midstream to see how well we're doing. Now, a formative assessment doesn't necessarily have to be a concept check though either. It can be done in a number of different ways. It can be done in a discussion. It can be done in a short journal prompt within the lesson. It can be any one of those ways. It's just that the strategy is to make sure that the student is following along there with us, because as we know with the cognitive principles and learning and things like that, the mind can only take so much at one time, and so we want to chunk it out. And at the end of a chunk, we want to have something where we're checking and asking questions and interfering, so to speak, to make sure that they're with us. So your assignment for this week is going to be to come up with a formative assessment for your course. And again, it can be a concept check, and a lot of times it ends up being that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. It's really up to you, and I'm not going to lead you any way on that. It's all going to depend on the specifics of your course and how things are working along, what you're doing for your instructor perspective if you're planning that, just to keep that in check and in mind. It should work out really well. I know that you're working along on your projects, and you're doing a fantastic job with that, and I'm going to continue to get excited about seeing those things, and that's going to be great. Last thing is that with the formative assessment, we're going to be over the next 2 weeks. We're going to be making some comparisons between what formative assessment is and what summative assessment is, which is going to be for Module 11. And they work together quite well. They're distinctly different, but we're going to have some opportunities to kind of think through the differences and the similarities and the relationships between formative and summative assessment. So you can have you can be anticipating that for next week. So if you have any questions, you know how to do that. It's the Q&A forum, or if there's anything specific for me, you can certainly email me, and everything's good with that. And I hope you have a wonderful week. Take care.